Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Welcome back to How People Behave. My name's Peter Agnew from People Development Australia, and today we're also joined with Mark Hoare from People Development Australia. Mark, today we're going to have a bit of a chat about how to find your personality type using DISC. We use lots of models to help describe things. We use models to predict the weather. In economics, we use models. Why do we use a model when it comes to behaviour?
Well, look, I guess the answer is because one of the episodes you actually said it. Behaviour. Understanding people is not rocket science. Is actually far more difficult than that. Well, we've been using behaviour models, believe it or not, and I think I mentioned this in another episode, back for millennia. The Greeks started doing it, and I think it was Socrates who actually looked at the different types of behaviour, and he said that the cholerics were somehow had something that made them angry, and they were slightly more aggressive. The sanguines were, highly effusive and, red-faced and jolly. Believe it or not, the phlegmatics were somewhat stifled in their personality because there was some sort of body fluid issue. I mean, if you read it, it's quite bizarre. And then the fourth description was the melancholy, who are the reserved, quiet, analytical type. So we've been using behavioral models for centuries, well, millennia, and certainly in the industrial age, we've been using it for centuries. There are many of them, and they all do very different things.
Definitely.
And which is the best one? That's a whole other conversation. Depends what you're measuring, of course.
But in essence, it's about breaking down that complexity so we mere mortals can understand the way people behave in our workplace, in our small businesses, all of those sorts of things.
One of the things we'll get to a little later in this episode is the part that I enjoy the absolute most, which is when people, first of all, we get an awareness of ourselves, which is critical. But what is amazing to me, and I've been doing this for decades, is when the light goes on that people value completely different things to me. And for some people, it's a real aha, light bulb moment that, golly, what I really enjoy really stresses you. And isn't that fascinating? Who knew? And that's the piece, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the who knew.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
and developing that self-awareness around that as well. So today we're going to use the DISC model, which is, as you mentioned, one of the models to help explain behaviour and break down that complexity.
Yep.
It's probably one of the world's leading behavioural models. There's a few on the market, but DISC is certainly one of the leading. What are the origins of DISC, and where's DISC come from?
Well, it's a four-base model, D for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, or I much prefer the word supportiveness, but anyway, the word is steadiness, and then C for conscientiousness. And as you can see, originally developed by William Marsden back in 1928. Marsden was what we would call today a behavioral psychologist. He's also the inventor of Wonder Woman. Google him, he's quite an interesting character. So today, the DISC with a little I is a product owned by a large organization based out of the US, which is an online computer assessment tool that essentially measures two aspects of personality. And as you can see on the screen, the first one it measures is our need to be in control. And so I guess if you walk into an environment where what's going on makes you feel uncomfortable, or there's something that's not right about it, the people who want to be in control are going to try and exert their authority onto changing that environment so that they make themselves feel comfortable by changing the environment. The other group of people that sit in the bottom part of the hemisphere are those people that walk into an environment where they feel uncomfortable, and they will adapt their behavior to fit within the environment. So it's not wrong or right, it's not good or bad. In fact, they're quite symbiotic. Quite often you'll find people in relationships where we marry or engage to complete, not compete, where somebody who wants to be in control will often work very effective with or be in partnership with somebody who's not wanting to be in control. So it's actually quite symbiotic. And then the other part of the model is the need to be around people, as it says there, to affiliate. They really are people. Their language is about people. Their Facebook page, is measured in the hundreds. And their life is filled, and their conversation about emotion, and they're highly animated. Then the other group of people are what we call the Detaches. They have a need for solitude, and they love games like golf and surfing, and they're not big into team sports. A bit of a generalization there, but they have a need to, again, remove themselves. In fact, I'm married to a Detacher, and that completing piece is really quite interesting, where my wife is quite private, whereas I'm the opposite to that, which is wonderful and also challenging at exactly the same time. So definitely. Understanding ourselves is really useful.
Yeah, definitely. And some various concepts there around some wording around the model. As we go through this, we'll sort of reveal the model for those who are unaware of the circumplex that is DISC. But before we do that, what does this DISC measure? How can we sort of figure out what the behavioural model of DISC measures?
So DISC is a needs-based driven model. If we go to the next slide, you'll see how that works. So we all have, in fact, if Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one that we might all be familiar with. If I've not eaten for 2 weeks and you're eating a sandwich, it's highly likely I'm going to try and steal your sandwich because I have a need to feed myself. And so it goes back to the basic needs, but this is a higher level than that. So we all have needs, and those needs are pretty well established by just after infancy, 5 to 7 years of age. Those needs are pretty well in place. Those needs fill up then through values and beliefs, and values and beliefs are, again, typically in place by the end of our adolescence, early 20s. And interestingly, our values won't change much unless we have been part of or witnessed an emotional event. That then moves through to thoughts and feelings, and then it's about how we behave. And it's interesting have you ever felt like crying but it's been totally inappropriate to cry, or you've had to go and do something when actually all you wanted to do was something completely different? So our thoughts and feelings are not a good indicator of how we behave. So what DISC is a decoder, if you like, that says if we have a set of needs, those needs will end up those needs will actually end up delivering a set of behaviors. So if you have a need, for example, to be liked, the chances are you're going to be acting in a warm, friendly, likable manner because you're going to portray what you want back. If you have a need for...
I think we had a couple of those needs on the next page. Yeah.
So if you have a need to be right, you're going to be much more focused on the detail than you are with, how was everybody's weekend? Because that doesn't help you be right, particularly. If you want to be in control, if you want to have fun, you can read them there. In fact, they're all good examples of the 4 quadrants. And none of them are right. And that's one of the things that I think is one of the greatest challenges when we first look at the model, indeed any models, is that what we presume is the right one. Most often.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not constructive and it's not helpful. I know, as you can hear from my accent, I grew up in the UK, and everybody that my soccer team played against was English Church of England schools, except one, which was the Roman Catholic school, and I never understood why there was a picture of a statue of a lady holding a baby, because it was completely unknown to us. And because that was different, what we don't know we're frightened of or we make wrong. The DISC model means that it's simply not wrong, it's just different. There's nothing right or wrong or better or worse, it's just people are different to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just like models that do predict the weather and do predict economic conditions and so forth, at the end of the day, they are just models though, aren't they? They are a part that helps us break down that complexity. And we sort of talk about tendencies rather than absolutes in some ways as well.
Yeah, look, there's, 7 billion of us on the planet, and the clue is there's only one of us, and there's 7 billion others. That might be the clue there. And I guess the model is just that. It's an indicator, it's a decoder that gives us some rules to say if we see somebody behaving in a particular way, there are some indicators that there are some needs going on, that if we adapt our behavior to be more flexible and to include the person that we're interacting with's needs, it's likely we're going to be more effective.
Definitely.
So
in a snapshot, if we went back to that and we looked at that as an iceberg, that previous model, we know that DISC is virtually measuring needs-driven behaviour. The behaviour is some of that stuff that we see above the water if this was an iceberg. The behaviour is the stuff that we see day to day when interacting with others. Probably what we don't see though is the needs. So we're virtually inferring based on a certain behaviour that they have a number of needs. Would that be right?
Well, in fact, you can't. If you think of your partner or the people that you love dearly, the only thing that you can understand is how they behave. You don't know their needs or their thoughts or feelings. You can extrapolate and think you do, but the reality is you don't. The only thing we can see, even of our closest ones to us, is how they behave.
Can we predict by someone's behaviour what sort of style they would be?
Very much, yeah. And that's part of what we're going to help you with, I guess, over the course of these episodes is, look, the best way to understand what your DISC profile is obviously to do the DISC profile. And the next best way is to watch this episode, and we'll unpack that for you. So let's get into that.
So if we move through, we've had a little bit of a look at those different needs there. How do we get to know our own DISC style, though? There's probably the one way where we pop online and we go through a very scientific process in some ways that's got adaptive testing and all of those sorts of things. But before we sort of mention the more formal way of getting to know our style, there's going to be people who are watching who are going to want to know, well, I wonder what style I am. How do I figure that out? So what are some ways we can get to understand about what our own style is? Is there a way we can measure that?
So there are very, very, very simple ways. So if the premise is needs and behaviour, so what we're looking for is our behaviour when we compare to others. And so here are some questions that we put together. So when you think about yourself compared to others, is your word count faster per minute than most people? So listening to Peter and I think I'd probably speak a little bit faster than Peter. Do I speak louder than some people? Definitely would be the answer to that one. Do I use more notation? I guess what we meant there was, is there more cadence? Do you go more up and down, or is your language more monotone? Do you make decisions quickly, for example? Are you highly active and fast-paced? And are you somebody who wants to take charge of a situation very quickly? So if you...
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.